Welcome to the Atkinson Gazette. I'm your host, Michael Boucher. The Atkinson Gazette is a community-created news program delivering important news and events in and around Atkinson. First up, let's dive into construction projects that are happening within the Timberlane Regional School District.
Hello everyone, my name is Michael Boucher. I'm a former school board member for the Timberlane Regional School District. I'm also a resident of Atkinson, and I recently participated in the school tours that took place during the month of September. The school tours are being put on by the School Budget Committee, and they are guided by Karl Ingoldsby, who is the Director of Plan Operations for the Timberlane Regional School District. In this video, you'll be able to see me participate in an interview with Karl Ingoldsby, who was able to provide me with the information about all the various different projects that happen within the school district, and also to discuss the future projects and potential future projects that could also take place. The facility tours take place in all school buildings over a span of 3 evenings. With help from fellow Atkinson resident Chris Duerr, we went to these schools to capture footage of the current condition of the buildings and to view the work of recent and current projects. In some buildings, such as at Pollard Elementary and Danville Elementary, renovation work can be observed as different eras in time and visually stand out as you walk through hallways. We also got to experience the unique themes each school have on display to create a welcoming atmosphere for students and staff. For example, at Atkinson Academy, their theme appeared to emphasize personal growth and empathy. Furthermore, we were able to observe some of the spaces which have been specialized for occupational and physical therapy. Coming up is my interview with the Director of Plan Operations, Karl Ingoldsby.
My name is Karl Ingoldsby. I'm the Director of Plan Operations for Timberlane Regional School District. I've been with the district just over 2 years. I'm in the middle of my 3rd year, and I look forward to chatting with you about what we're doing here at Timberlane. The Budget Committee hosts facility tours every fall to let the public know what we've done over the summer and what we're planning to do, and show off some of the work we've done and the conditions of our facilities so that we have an informed public for what they're going to be voting on as far as our budget for the facilities.
What are some of the routine annual maintenance that's done district-wide that affects the budget?
Well, we have lots of routine maintenance that goes on. We have HVAC PMs. We have all the required inspections and testing, such as asbestos monitoring. I have a list of them up here. We have the packed turntable that requires an extensive PM, stage rigging PMs, inspections. We have the bleacher inspections, both interior and exterior, as well as the auditorium seating inspections. I have a list of them over here. That's why I'm looking. Fire sprinkler, fire alarm inspections and testings, fire life safety inspections, generator PMs, kitchen hoods have to be inspected every year. They have to be cleaned twice a year. There's quite a bit. So every 5 years we have to replace the fire sprinkler gauges. We have to do internal inspections on the sprinklers. The list goes on.
Can you describe the difference between like the CIP, what CIP is, and also what the lease is that recently got passed?
Sure. So the capital improvement plan is it's a committee that gets together and decides what projects should be put forth and scheduled for over the next, say, 5 or 6 years. Things on that list could range from an HVAC unit being replaced, a boiler being replaced, a roof being replaced, and as part of our budget we have $1.8 million set aside for capital improvements. What we tried to do when I first got here, the district was replacing one HVAC unit or a boiler a year and slowly addressing years of items that need to be addressed. We have over $120 million worth of capital projects that need to be done rather quickly, and the CIP process would take just a little too long. So I brought in a process called that we basically go out to lease, and we have an energy company come in and do audits and tell us the best way to save energy while addressing some of these issues. Putting a propane boiler in instead of the same old oil burner in will save a lot of money, and it's better for the environment to burn propane rather than oil. So they come in, they do an assessment, and they came back and they had a set of priorities that was talked about and discussed at a meeting, and we decided to bring forth a lease project for $25 million, which will be spread over 3 or 4 years, and we started that process this year. A lot of those things are things you won't see because it's on the roof. HVAC units, the roofs themselves getting replaced, boilers getting replaced, so these aren't out in the public eye, and that's why these tours are so important for people to come see what we're actually doing.
Can you kind of go through each of the major, or I shouldn't say go through, but
Sure.
if you could kind of like highlight kind of some of the bigger projects that happen at each building?
Okay, so for this year, as far as the lease project, we were finishing up, well, before the lease project, we're finishing up an ESSER-funded project, which was the replacement of 4 major HVAC units at the middle school. As part of our CIP this year, we're also doing the Atkinson roofs. We replaced 3 of them. Danville boilers, we changed all 3 of those out, consolidated them into one boiler room, and changed them from oil to propane. We're also doing the controls up at Danville for the HVAC systems. Middle school, we had planned to do the controls for the middle school HVAC. However, we just couldn't get this job done during the summer, so it's scheduled for next summer. District-wide masonry study. We have several buildings that have masonry walls or CMU walls that are having issues with efflorescence and stuff, so we had a study conducted to figure out what's going on with that. We found out that they are safe. However, there needs to be something done to stabilize them, and we'll be bringing forward what that's going to entail. Sandown and Central electric panels, they are old federal panels, and one of them caught fire just prior to my arrival. So we've been looking at replacing those. Those are going to be done over Christmas vacation this year. As part of the lease, we're changing all the lights in the elementary schools from fluorescent to LED, which will save us a lot of money. In addition to that, they're going to have controls integrated in them that will save money even more by turning off with occupancy, dimming down with daylight sensing, and they'll also have dimmable capabilities to allow teachers to do stuff like that. Another thing is the Atkinson Academy belfry repairs. We just completed a study, and we'll be bringing forward to the CIP the cost of doing that and figuring out where we're going to fit that into to our repairs. The middle school roof was replaced this summer. High school boilers are being replaced right now as we speak. The high school hot water heaters have been replaced. We have fire panels that are up for replacement at Pollard High School, Middle School, and the Danville Elementary. That's probably going to be a next year project. We're still going through code reviews on that. And then Pollard Elementary, all their sprinkler heads are out of date and have to be replaced, so that's going to be probably done next summer as well. Middle school, we're on October 16th, we'll be starting to replace the controls for the middle school LEDs. We will be adding occupancy sensing, daylight sensing, and dimmable capabilities for those LED lights that we've already switched out. That's the EEI ESSER / lease things that we've moved forward with. Projects that we're doing in-house, we're getting ready to replace the flooring at the SAU. High school asbestos tile replacement. We had several areas of the high school and middle school that had cracked and damaged tiles. Unfortunately, there's asbestos in the floor mastic, so we had to abate the damaged ones and replace them with tiles. And then we're going to be moving forward, hopefully, with a plan to do whole buildings, just get rid of the asbestos and abate it all and replace with some sort of a rubber flooring that we no longer have to wax. We have a continued paint cycle that we're doing. We just started that this summer, and we painted a little bit of each building, and we're going to go through and keep that going. Parking lot maintenance we started this summer, where we crack sealed every parking lot, which was a major project. We're going to be bringing forward some repairs at some of the places that we can that we're going to have to rip up the pavement and pave new. But mostly what we're going to be focusing on is maintaining now. So we're going to crack seal every year, not as much as this year, and line striping. So. Ongoing field work. We started a new program this July where we're going to add top dressing, aeration, frequent aeration, overseeding multiple times, and we're also trying to rebuild we did rebuild the practice football field, and we're going to make that also a lacrosse practice field, which will give the main game field more rest. We installed gates to block access behind Danville Elementary and Atkinson. We've put some fencing up beside Danville to allow to keep cars from driving around the gates that we put up. We're looking at putting some fencing behind Danville's playground, and we're putting some backstops up at Sandown North to prevent balls from going into the woods. The PAC auditorium, there's some of the doors there, the building's 22 years old, and some of the hardware on it is just worn out, so we're replacing that. We're renovating the track. The track was in need of renovation for years. The coating on it had delaminated to the point where it was just bubbling, so it had to be ripped off, and we need to recoat it. That's in progress. Looks to be complete by the end of track season next year, so we'll be able to hold meets again the following year. The tennis court has been ripped up, and we were hoping to try to get it completed by this fall. Unfortunately, the amount of rain this year has pushed a lot of projects into next year, so it looks like we will have that finished by May of next year. And we've done the PAC turntable repair. We did a PM on the PAC turntable this year, and all the bearings and wheels underneath had to be replaced, so that was done. We had a sprinkler leak underground outside the high school that had been causing pumps to fail and fire alarms to go off intermittently, and we finally found that this summer and repaired that leak. We raised some catch basins on the entry area to the high school and middle school. That was a issue where cars were really getting jerked around when they tried to pull into the high school and middle school, so we raised those culverts up. We repaired the middle school back sidewalk and planted some grass back there. The patio outside had cracks in it. We repaired that. We made an ADA access ramp into the observatory. We repaired, I would say renovated, but we didn't replace any of the fixtures. What we did is we took down all the partitions. We took down all the urinals and got rid of actually some of the urinals to give more room and access to the restrooms in the middle school. We conducted renovations to 3 of them down there. We installed ASD cubbies for autism in 2 classrooms, one at Sandown Central and one at Atkinson Academy. We expanded the middle school IT office. We added a wall to Sandown North, room 144. We repaired a kitchen floor drain at Danville Elementary that was so clogged that the snake got broken off, and we had to actually dig up the floor and rip the drain out to get that out. we repaired a leaking window at the Sandown North Library. It had flashing issues, and we got that fixed. Well, we're replacing the Atkinson Academy and Danville Elementary walk-in freezers. Both of them have failed boxes, so the whole thing really needs to be ripped out and replaced, and that's getting worked on. And we just replaced the SAU's fire panel as it had broken components inside it, and it was time. So yes, we were quite busy this summer.
For the HVACs, the boilers, and the LED upgrades, how much money is the district expected to save? Kind of like a rough estimate.
I don't have those numbers on me. It's well, the lighting will pay for itself in 5 years, so it's quite a lot. I didn't add that we're also looking into solar, so that's a big thing that we'll be bringing a warrant article, I believe, this year if the board wants to, that I'm pushing for. But I really don't have those numbers on me.
Do you have any specific concerns or repairs in any of these buildings that you're, I don't want to say bad phrasing, but looking forward to in the near future?
I'm always looking forward to upgrading the HVAC. All these units are over 20 years old and could fail at any given time, and if that happens, then we don't have areas of the building that are going to be heated. Case in point, we had a compressor fail on an AC unit this summer. They don't make them anymore because they're 20 plus years old and they don't use that Freon anymore, the RJ12 or whatever they call it. So we have to get by without that now, so until we can replace that unit. So,
do you have any examples, like in any facility that you can think of off the top of your head?
As far as
like repairs that they have to be dealt with, like you mentioned the
AHU3 in the middle school, Sandown North has one that's in rough shape, and we're babying it. The high school boilers was a big one. With that, we had 8 boilers in there, and 4 of them were bad, and then the controller we lost last year, and they don't make the controller for it anymore. So that was a big thing that, since that was passed with the warrant article, that we got moved forward. If we hadn't, we'd be manually running those boilers all winter, and it would have been a nightmare.
What major future projects are being planned within the district?
Well, we got the continued projects with the leases. We have some of those that are rolling over from this year into next year. We have additional HVAC. Next year, the high school is getting half of a roof and half the HVAC replaced. It's getting the controls for the HVACs upgraded. The year after that, it'll do the other half of the roof and the other half of the HVAC units. I'm looking forward to bringing forward a solar plan to try to get solar into the district. Right now, there's a rebate that's ridiculous. It's ridiculous to pass up. If we put a $3 million system out here, we get $900,000 rebate after we pay for it, and then we save more money than the lease will cost. So it's a revenue generating process for us. And then I'm looking at all the other buildings, adding solar to them as well. Roofs at a lot of the building, HVAC pretty much across the district, controls across the district for HVAC. Like right now, I can't see Pollard from here. I can't log onto my system and see what's going on there, so that's going to be one of the things that are addressed. We've got quite a bit. I'm looking at cabinet repairs. Throughout the district, we have cabinets that are 50, 60 years old and just are tired and need to be replaced, so I'm looking at that as well.
Okay.
Siding on the buildings. The front canopy at the high school is in decrepit shape. I'd like to replace that or repair it or get rid of it or something. So we're looking at a lot of things.
What challenges does the district face in order to address future repairs and maintenance?
I would have to say the biggest challenge is the tax rates in some of the towns. It's hard to swallow some of these costs when you're paying high taxes. So I try to be very conscious of that. I try to bring energy efficiency and like the solar, it's going to be paying for itself and then some. So hopefully that's a big selling point for these things. I'm a taxpayer in another district, so I understand what happens when you spend money. So I'm always conscious about trying to save energy and money when we do a project. And I like to do things right, so sometimes they're a little more expensive, but in the long run it saves money.
Are you worried if you're unable to get the funding for those projects? Like, what would happen?
I think the biggest issue would be is if we can't change, if we know we have an HVAC system that's aging, they have a life expectancy. Take for instance Danville. We had a boiler up there that had cracked multiple times. Those boilers controlled one section of the building. There was no redundancy. They just controlled their one area. So when that boiler failed, we had a cold building, no school. That's the impact we have if we don't maintain or upgrade some of the equipment. It's just one of those things. You have to maintain or upgrade equipment on a regular basis. HVAC units last around 20 years. We had a cycle at one of my districts where every 15 years we got a new HVAC unit, so it prevented things from failing, and that's what you try to do, is prevent things from failing to interrupt school.
Do you have any backup, or it's basically we got to fix it, or that's it?
Well, emergency repairs stink because it has to get fixed. We do not have redundancies, and we don't have the space to say, oh, we can shut down this portion of the building because we don't have HVAC. What's great about this district and unique about this district is you do have a capital budget in the budget. Usually we have to go to warrant article, or we have expendable trust funds that are set aside for emergencies, but we can tap off that, which is a blessing. But again, we have plans for that money, and when we spend that money, those things that are planned get pushed out, and that's why you try to get ahead of it and not play catch up.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, is there, I guess, anything else that you wanted to let everyone else know about?
Nope. I thank you for the support in the budget process over the past 2 years. We've been able to increase our budget to get things in that need to be done, and I appreciate the support, and I hope everybody can see the outcomes of what we're trying to do here.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The budget committee hosts these school tours every year, and I've always found that they're a good way to see the current conditions of our schools. And we get to see how our budget is being managed, where majority of the budget is being spent. Karl Ingoldsby, in my opinion, has done a great job informing us of all the different projects that we've had going on within the school district. And I think with this information, you'll be able to make a better and more informed decision when it's time to vote.
Up next, Sarah Robertson from Granite State Progress came to Kimball Library to tell us about upcoming changes to public education.
Sarah Robinson from Granite State Progress here tonight. She's going to be talking about some of the key challenges and ongoing threats to public education in New Hampshire. Sarah is the Education Justice Campaign Director for Granite State Progress. She's a graduate of New Hampshire Public Schools and received her undergraduate degree at New England College in Henniker, New Hampshire. She has been deeply committed to the advancement of social justice in her community and state, particularly through the Concord chapter of Showing Up for Racial Justice that she helped establish in 2015. She's an alumni of the 2021 cohort of Leadership New Hampshire, a co-chair for the Manchester NAACP's Education Committee, a trained peacekeeper. That is wonderful. How can I get trained in that?
I can hook you up with that.
I love that. And participates in many other volunteer efforts within her community. She was recently elected by wards 8, 9, and 10 in Concord, New Hampshire to serve a 3-year term on the local public school board. God bless you. That began in January of
Y'all are real nice.
Right. Let's welcome Sarah Robinson.
Hi. Thanks very much. I'm going to try and be as respectful of everyone's time as possible. So if it feels like I'm going a little too fast, Feel free to reel me in. If you have questions as I go, just like feel free to ask them. It's a pretty small room, so I feel like this can be as conversational as we need it to be. And thank you very much, Michael, for the invitation to join you guys. I'm all over the state talking to Democratic committees and having conversations just like this. So first, let's see if I can make this work. So just sort of like laying the groundwork, the foundation of what is going on in public education right now. We're all well aware of all of these factors, I assume, that we have big gaps in public school funding. We have the most expansive voucher program in the country right now. We have a statewide ban on an honest education through our banned or divisive concepts law. And we're facing bills every single session of the legislature to further defund public education, privatize schools, and pull kiddos outside of the classroom instead of maintaining the integrity of our schools. Yeah.
When you say honest education, is that the decisive issues?
Yeah, we use honest education language to push back against anti-CRT or critical race theory, hysteria kind of stuff. Honest education meaning the full breadth of an education. It's a good question. Thank you.
Do you have any idea approximately how much was spent on the voucher program?
Oh God, I think we're at 40 million right now, headed into our second year of it, with 4,000 students utilizing it. Only 400 of those having left a public school district. The rest were already in private or homeschool situations. And there are 500 students that have left the program but have not returned to their public schools, so we don't know where they are. Anyway, tonight's agenda, I was told that we'd like to have a quick conversation about the legislative landscape, where we are with the minimum standards for public education and ongoing threats to privatize our public schools. The legislature has submitted their legislative service requests, which is what a bill is before it becomes a bill. Of those, 15% of those bills will have some effect, good or bad, on public education. Of those, we know that we have 4 freedom to read bills, which we're very excited about. One is to guard book bans against K through 12 libraries. The other is to stop book bans against public libraries. One is for a committee to study library science's best practices. And the other is, what's the fourth one? I forget, I'll come back to it. But it's a right of action by librarians who receive harassment at work. So giving them a more finite way legally to be able to protect themselves at work. There's also a bad actor bill. Glenn Cordelli continues to file an obscene materials bill, which is an overall book banning bill that just makes it very easy to pull books off of a shelf without a full inquiry by a district or library.
Yeah, you just mentioned a name there. Who's that rep?
Glenn Cordelli is from Wolfboro.
Okay.
He's on the education committee. He is one of the primary architects of just about anything that affects public education. He's a real privatization guy. He does not like me, which I think is a sign of doing my job. Voucher program expansions are always big every session. Now that we have a voucher program, the goal is to remove the cap entirely for participation. There's also a local voucher program so the current program takes adequacy funding that the state gives, around $4,100 per child. A local fund would take the remaining property taxes dedicated to educating a student and giving it to that family for the exact same purposes that they currently use vouchers. So that can range anywhere from an average of $20,000 per student out of a local district, out of taxpayer dollars, directly to families. We're really worried about a local voucher program in our state.
Could you just repeat that, the 2 different places the money comes from?
I would be happy to. The state provides about 30% of what it costs to educate a student in New Hampshire. The base pay for each student is referred to as adequacy aid. It's around $4,100 per student. You then have state differentiated aid if a student requires special education services or if they qualify for free and reduced price lunch. They just eliminated the adequacy aid or the differentiated aid for students who cannot read by 3rd grade. That was removed in the last biennium or in the last budget session and replaced with catastrophic aid supports for communities that qualify based on poverty levels. So they removed one stream of money to replace it with another that I would argue is not as robust. So that money is currently what families take through the voucher program, that 30%. Your district, your taxpayers pay for the remaining 60%, pardon me, 70%. There's a little bit that comes from the feds, but the outsized amount is out of all of our wallets. A local voucher program would allow families to take that big chunk away from your local district. It's a really problematic law. It would bankrupt schools that are in poverty poor towns. All right, so I'm like, this is gonna be like drinking from a fire hose, and I totally apologize, but there's so much going on in education all the time. We defeated a parental bill of rights for the 2nd year in a row last session, and it was indefinitely postponed, which means that the bill is not allowed to be reintroduced until another budget session. Our budget is done every 2 years. So this session, they weren't allowed to introduce the forced outing bill. So in order to dodge that, Republicans decided to take the key pieces of the bill and break it up into multiple bills. So we're going to have a bill that would ban educators from using a student's chosen name and pronouns. So we're going to be fighting that in the legislature this year, as well as several bills that attempt to take away a minor's medical privacy and decision-making abilities, what little they already have, and not allowing schools to assist if a child needs medical attention without parental involvement, which unfortunately in an emergency situation could be really difficult if you need a parent there to approve every little thing. So there's probably like 7 bills related to the forced outing bill that we're looking at working against this session. We've got the divisive concepts bill or the banned concepts bill. There's every year there is a bill to repeal that law. It's currently being litigated, and we have, knock on wood, we're pretty confident that we're going to win that lawsuit based on a charge of vagueness of the bill and the DOE not being able to clearly define to educators what is required of them and how they could potentially violate the bill. So because they could violate it unknowingly without any guidance, that bodes well for us from a litigative standpoint. There's also a banned concepts bill that would expand the divisive concepts restriction into higher education, as well as currently we're looking at a tax on social emotional learning, also known as SEL. Pretty much every district in the United States offers some form of social emotional learning. It's about working in teams, having empathy for others. It's a progression of anti-CRT moving through Republicans recognizing that being racist doesn't work and being mean to the LGBTQ community doesn't work, so they're moving on to empathy and attacking empathy in schools and in our kids. It's a progression of all the same attacks, trying to create a toxic environment. We also have Education Commissioner Credentials Bill. Commissioner Frank Edelblut does not have the credentials that we believe he needs to be a successful commissioner. So this bill would require anyone who would hold that seat to have a minimum of 5 years teaching within a classroom, a public school classroom. So we're hoping that we can be successful in that. It's still yet to be seen, but at least we'll be having the conversation. Yeah.
Got a question about that Education Commissioner Credentials Bill.
Yeah.
In order for something like that to pass, do we need to have the right governor in place?
We need to have the right House, Senate, and governor in place. Currently, we're at a 50-50 split on the House floor. We're at a 14-10 split in the Senate, and that will probably remain that way for the next 10 years based on gerrymandering. And the governor is ultimately, if something passes both houses, the governor still has to sign it or wait 5 days with it unsigned, and then it comes into law without them having to make a clear decision on something, which is something actually John Lynch was really notorious for. He would just not sign things and let them go into law, which is fine, you know, governors govern differently. But Chris Sununu loves to veto things and loves to make a big show of vetoing things. So we won't have to worry about him very much longer. But I'm crossing my fingers we get a Democratic governor in office so that we can make some real productive change if things make it through a Senate that is lopsided. All right, so ED 306s is a 110-page document that is impossible to read. It is full of legal jargon, and it is the compliance document that all superintendents use to make sure that they're running the schools the way the state wants them to. What your kid eats in the cafeteria, what professional development their teachers can get, what classes you are required to teach. All of these things are bound up in this large document. So they are re-met every 10 years so that we can make sure that they are up to date with best practice, what is best pedagogy. That's an arbitrary thing, just the founders of these rules decided, let's make it every 10 years and that way we won't forget about them. The rules are supposed to make it so that every kiddo who goes to school in New Hampshire gets the same education regardless of where they live, though we know that's never actually happened here. But that's the gist. So these rules are in their 10-year interim, and this is a little bit, can look a little bit messy, but it is sort of the process with which the rule-making process follows. So the State Board of Ed looks at an initial draft that was written by a hired consultant. They take the time to read them and then decide if they need revision after a public hearing. This is the way the process normally goes. After the State Board of Ed has a public hearing, those rules go to the Joint Legislative Committee for Administrative Rules, also known as JLCAR. They make sure that the rules comply with state law. Those rules go back to the State Board of Education with any corrections. The State Board of Ed accepts them as the rules and they become the law of the land. There are lots of problems with this draft. It removes certification requirements for educators, removes safeguard language for federally protected classes, specifically around equitable discipline for students and making sure that you have specific accommodations for different protected classes. It has not included the voices of parents or students or many educators for that matter. Yeah.
No, is this stuff proposed now currently?
It absolutely is.
Okay, I might have missed that.
No, not at all. I didn't say. And thank you for the clarifying question. The current rules with all of these issues are laid on the table by the State Board of Education right now. They've been on the table since March of 2023. They can take them off the table and approve them in this format whenever they'd like. However, we have next steps for this. So like I mentioned, parents groups were not asked to participate in this process, which is frustrating because those are the folks who are in the mix right now, right? Like they have the best insight into how schools are serving or are not serving our kids. They're a group of people that should be consulted. So here's the timeline. The New Hampshire Department of Education and the New Hampshire State Board of Education are the ultimate deciders. They are an appointed body. They are not elected. Their consultant that they hired to rewrite these rules is Fred Bramante. He's a Manchester native. His organization is called the Center for Competency-Based Learning. The 306 rules that we've got a lot of problems with, like I mentioned, were tabled in March. The consultant, Fred Bramante, is compiling suggestions from listening sessions that happened over the course of the spring and early fall. An additional individual, Christine Downing, of her own time and own energy, she was not paid or asked to, but she's one of the original writers of the 306s. She consulted educators over the entire month of August, over 200 educators, and got their feedback. So these streams of feedback are going to be condensed and reported on by the consultant, Fred Bramante. He plans to present those recommendations to the commissioner in December. December 14th is the next State Board of Education meeting that we expect these rules to be at. However, the next State Board of Ed meeting is on November 9th, next week. So should the commissioner have a change of heart and decide he's sick of waiting, he could ask the board to pull the draft off the table and vote on it as it is. We don't know what they're going to do. We hope they wait until December and that they act in good faith and take recommendations from the public and implement them into the draft as is. They have proven that they have not done that in the past when the public has had some outcry over please don't cheapen our children's standards, like implementing PragerU as part of Learn Everywhere is a good example. Thousands of people wrote into the State Board of Ed saying please don't implement this curriculum option, and they did so anyway. So like I said, the next meetings happen. They start at 10 a.m. They're at Granite State College on Hall Street in Concord. If you like to go and have someone be there with you, I will save you a seat. I'm at all of these things. So I love having friends join me. Ongoing threats to privatization. I know, I said it was going to go super fast. So if you have any questions, please feel free to interrupt me. Yeah.
Do you have any kind of slide thing or something you could send us if we leave our email?
Yeah, absolutely. I can
Okay.
send you all kinds of fun stuff, memos and talking points, and I can send you the side-by-side of the draft, like whatever you want. I've got all kinds of stuff.
Okay.
But I could probably teach a course on this, so
Okay.
we're limited in time, but if you want to follow up, please do. I would love to just have lots of conversations. Our ongoing threats and privatization efforts against public schools include harming funding, like our school voucher expansion, with, it says here, no urgency from the governor or either legislative bodies to find a solution to our funding issues, even though we've been suing the state for 30 years and currently have 2 lawsuits around school funding that are pending in the judicial system. Harming honest and inclusive public schools through book ban attempts and attacks on the LGBTQ+ community. Also an undermining of DEIJ and B work, as well as SEL. We've seen a huge pushback from the State Board of Ed against DEIJ work, which is the diversity, equity, and inclusion work, including them publicly saying in a meeting that they think DEIJ is the most dangerous ideology facing our students today. Ryan Turer said that during a public portion of the meeting. We have a lack of non-discrimination policies at private and religious schools. We've been misleading parents about signing away their rights to various, as a result of using privatization measures. You lose a lot of your rights as a student when you move to a homeschool or a private school situation where a public school is legally obligated to meet all of your needs as a student. Also harming the quality of what we get to teach in our public schools, weakening standards currently through the ED 306s, unbundling public school curriculum, so taking away when you look at public education, it's a big basket full of options. And people who are interested in privatization want to take those options away and make them something parents are responsible to seek out independently. That's actually, unbundling is a term that the right uses proudly. Yeah.
What's an example of that?
Instead of offering physical education, music, or art in your schools, making that something that you have to seek outside of school time and making parents responsible for coordinating on your behalf. So that's the quickest example I could give. We have elected officials and bad actors and vocal minorities creating toxic environments in our schools. All of us have an example of a community member or neighbor that we know that likes to cause trouble at a school board meeting. Maybe it's a handful of them. What we have noticed in our work is they are a very small group of people. They just happen to be very loud. When given the opportunity, communities do show up, and I'll talk about that soon. We do have extreme teacher shortages that are exacerbated by toxic environments, a lack of support for professional educators, and of course pay scales. So it's a lot, but communities are fighting back, either electing school board candidates who are pro-public school, showing up to either protest or take up space when there is an attempt to ban a book, or an attempt to pull back a trans inclusion policy like a JBAB policy that a school might employ. Communities over and over again overwhelmingly show up to support their kids and support their schools when these issues happen. I've got whole handfuls of examples of different communities who've been really successful in, and we're successful in every single one at fighting back at those attempts. School boards are tightening up their policies, so creating, updating their inclusion or discrimination policies to be compliant with state law and also reaffirm their values. Creating clear and decisive pathways for processing if someone challenges a book, and making sure that they're as up to date in their policies as possible to avoid any kind of lawsuit situation or having somebody be able to sneak in through a loophole. Increasing participation in civic life, like dragging your friends to deliberative session, asking your neighbors to join you, making a big show of going to vote and bringing your friends along. And also running for office, participating in your PTO or PTA, coaching, coaching sports, whatever it is that you have as a skill that you can add into your district secures your district from bad actors. Because when we're in there, when we're taking care of our kids and we're taking care of our community, it is much more difficult for people to come in and sow discourse. So that's pretty much it, I think. That's my very quick and dirty review of public education in the state. This is me, and Linz Jakehouse is our communications director. They are a marvelous person and actually are the founder of 603 Equality, which is the first statewide LGBTQ+ advocacy organization in the state. So they're the other half of my brain, we like to joke. And Sandra Rice Hawkins is our executive director. We touch on so much more than just education, but that's why I'm here today. So I'm happy to answer any questions. If you have requests for information or more in-depth documents, I'm happy to give them to everyone. Thank you all so much. I could talk about this all night, but I know that you have business to get to. So thank you very much for holding the space for me and being willing to have the conversation. I really appreciate it. Well, thanks very much.
Lastly, New Hampshire State Representative Eric Turer provided us with a state legislative update.
I'm Eric Turer from Brentwood. Currently the state rep for Brentwood. We have 1 1/3 state reps, so we share another one with Fremont and Danville. And prior to being state rep, I was the chair of the Brentwood Dems for about 20 years. It's great. Thank you for inviting me. It's really kind of an honor to be thought of as having something I can share with a neighboring town.
I'm very grateful for Eric making the trip over from Brentwood to speak with us tonight, and give us a little bit of an introduction to the highs and lows from the last session in the State House. Maybe talk a little bit about what you think are going to be the hot issues ahead, and then tell us what it's like being a first-term state rep.
We're super lucky in New Hampshire to have this type of government that we do. You are really connected to the people, and the partisanship in terms of like the committees and stuff. Every bill gets a vote. Every bill gets a hearing that comes up. Every bill gets a vote in committee. Every bill technically gets a vote on the floor. So it's actually pretty easy to serve in terms of the fact that you're not just being shoved around. Like the last few terms, the Republicans had big majorities. So ultimately we lost a lot of those votes. What I'll say in this past session, I don't know if you all saw the news about the big kumbaya moments around the budget and everything. And I've been leaning again into these kumbaya moments because I'm like, it shows that we actually are doing something, and, and that this unity and let's get back together kind of thing is the theme people want to hear. Might not be the theme that the Republicans that were in total control before wanted to hear, but we have Republican majorities in the House, the Senate, and the Executive Council. All three of those had majority Democratic popular votes. So it's one indication of kind of what we're up against, and also an indication that we could flip this pretty well if we can, well, the redistricting we're stuck with for a while, but the other stuff is not that far out of sight, even though, when you look at numbers like the Senate, which 14-10, Republicans. In the House, the nice thing, and this will be my last part of this current session, is the Democrats were largely united, largely around very popular things like, supporting your town's quality education, but cutting the cost, distributing the cost more fairly to the towns, supporting, the pensions and things, starting to return some of that money back to the towns. So a lot of it ends up being tax cuts locally. We keep trying to push the message that, these cuts that they make in Concord aren't tax cuts. They're tax cuts for somebody, but they're tax increases locally. So the Republicans were not largely united. They really are three completely separate parties on most issues, many issues. They've got your libertarians, like your secessionists, who think the government should do nothing and should basically more or less go away. You've got your social conservatives, which are, almost the polar opposites of them in many ways. They are very much about controlling intimate aspects of people's existence. And so those groups, do not come together easily. And then you've got your old sort of timey fiscal conservative Republicans in the middle, who this is all foreign, I think, to a lot of them, the older timer ones that, because there were no social issues not too long ago, and now they're like all you hear about. So what happened with those budget votes is the Republican majority in the finance committees put out a very right-leaning Republican budget, and right up till the day before those votes, we were going to oppose those budgets. But then the Republicans had to come to leadership of the Democratic committee and say, hey, we don't have the votes to pass the budget. And what would it take to get, your folks on board? And they made concessions, and we all looked at it literally the day of the vote and said, this is just infinitely better than it was, which is kind of like the best message I could think of, because it's like actually what I think is supposed to happen in Concord. So we didn't get everything we wanted. There's a couple of things that I really hope we can make people aware of in the next election cycle. Like my biggest one being they had already voted to end what's called the interest and dividends tax in New Hampshire. Over a 4-year cycle, they accelerated that. So basically it ends after this next year. That's the 5th largest source of revenue in the state. And it's paid for almost entirely by less than 5% of the state's population that earned that money off of
It's a great
investment.
tax. It's the most progressive tax in the country.
It's the most progressive
Wealthiest
tax.
people.
It was, but now they're not paying it anymore.
Yeah.
And the only reason they cut that tax was because they said it's a tax on income, because interest and dividends is income. They could have made some reforms, that would protect elderly people a little bit more who are living on that, but instead they just wiped it out. And so there's going to be a big budget deficit. Everyone's going to be, if that means less revenue sharing to the town, everyone's taxes are going to go up. And they're going to blame the Democrats somehow because we didn't cut taxes. It's the Republican tax cut. So that was one policy thing that I think needs to, it's a done deal at this point for this next year. So I don't think it's going to be a hot button issue as far as voting, but it's going to be hopefully a hot button issue in terms of messaging and making people aware. Or I hope it is. The abortion stuff is really backfiring, I think, pretty badly on the Republicans. I'm on the Judiciary Committee where all the rights-based stuff goes through. So, we had a slew of abortion bills that ran the gamut from, completely repealing their Sununu's 24-week, Fetal Life Protection Act. My wife's an obstetrician, so she'll be the first one to tell you, we don't have any abortions after 24 weeks in New Hampshire. Even the medically necessary ones get transferred to Boston. So, it's sort of a bill about nothing, but it became like, the precious, the thing that cannot be changed. And so, it was the Republicans on our committee, so that we had, getting rid of all that to, a 6-week abortion ban, and it was the Republicans that on our committee that led the votes on killing most of those. There were ones that we split on, but they were the sort of moderate ones. The 6-week ban, never saw the light of day. Because I think that is, again, people are waking up to the fact that, these things aren't guaranteed, and that, just because it's not, fully on in New Hampshire doesn't mean that people aren't paying attention to what, I don't know if you saw Ohio, totally, upended. They put a ballot measure on, and it got many more votes than it needed to pass. They tried to raise the threshold for passing it, and that went down in flames. So there's these signs around. So I think that's going to be a hot button issue. The school vouchers, we managed to beat back to some degree, but they're still there, and they're still growing a little bit. In case everyone doesn't know, these voucher programs, 85 to 90% of the money is people whose kids were already in private or home schools, and now these homeschool situations are starting to consolidate. There's these company that's basically promoting people signing up, opening their homes, and then sort of becoming the recipient of about a bunch of these homeschools, so it's turning into little private, living room schools. Maybe some of them are great, but they really have no oversight. They have administrative fees that these groups take for managing, the money. So the House has voted to legalize marijuana consistently. The Senate is less warm to the idea, and the governor said he would veto it under most circumstances. I think now he's saying under certain circumstances he might accept it. We'll see, since he's not running again. Maybe he'll be more open to it this time, because maybe he can find the magic bullet. It's a complicated one. I mean, I come from the public health world. I think our state has huge reliance on these industries that it basically says are bad for you and you shouldn't do them, and then basically promotes the heck out of them at every turn. I'm actually probably going to introduce a bill to at least have the state liquor stores promote awareness of the signs of alcoholism and referral numbers with each sale, like something they can give out with each sale. Hopefully that'll pass, because I just think it's crazy that, we have one of the higher alcoholism rates in the country, and almost every alcoholic in our state has a probably daily, if not or weekly, interaction with the state, and we don't provide anything in terms of, information or promotion, so the marijuana is like that. It's actually not as addictive as alcohol or tobacco or gambling, but it's still one of these things that, the only reason it's not fully private is, because it does have some downside effects for people. So why it hasn't passed, I think, is more, politically for certain groups. For the Republicans, it's not as tenable. But again, these free state people, the libertarians, they're all about, they've tried to legalize more than just marijuana. They've tried to legalize everything, right? So
Thank you.
well, thank you. I hope I hit on some of the things that I'll probably think of 10 things on the whole that answer your question about what are we really going to pay attention to.
Thank you for watching the Atkinson Gazette. We'll be back with news, information, and updates in our next episode.